Hello, welcome to the May 16th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream. In case you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could type in questions on your Steinberg products in the chat field. And if you have questions that are a bit more involved, you can send them in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that as the live stream goes on, my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner will soon be eclipsed, and I will try my best throughout the live stream to catch up. But realize that if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if you could just wait, and we'll try to go through all the questions chronologically. So if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase that you're using, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, if it's 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system, that information is helpful when asking questions. We should have an index of all the topics discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. So you can look for that several hours after the live stream. I have to watch the live. I'll take a quick dinner break, then I'll watch the live stream and go through all the different questions and get those entered in. So you can look for that. If you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm, I believe, is on the live stream already, has been kind enough to set that website up. It's a wonderful resource, an additional wonderful resource that you could have. And we want to thank Jazz Dude for this, is the Cubase Nation Discord. So it's a wonderful compilation of different tutorials and articles and that are really beneficial to the Steinberg community. We also have two people that serve as moderators. We want to give special thanks again to Jazz Dude and to Agent K for keeping everything organized. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this out of the goodness of their hearts. So we appreciate that. And as I mentioned before, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I basically work as a product specialist, focusing primarily on Steinberg products. I'm presenting from the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you live and where you're from, and we will go ahead and get started. Okay. So first question is, how can I make a song and style using digital Yamaha keyboard on Cubase and export? So, most of the styles, I'm not sure if the Yamaha keyboards actually transmit the MIDI data that's actually being generated for the styles, if that is transmitted out. Most of the arranger keyboards actually just, take like the incoming chords that you play and will do the styles based on that to the internal engine, but it may not allow you to transmit like the different patterns, the drum patterns, arpeggio, strings, and it may not allow you to take those different parts, and it may not transmit those out of the MIDI output of the keyboard. So you may have to just simply record it as audio. But if it is capable, you could just simply add. If we go to add a MIDI track, what we could do is, and then when we see our MIDI track here, we want to just make sure that you could put it on to record and put it on MIDI channel any, and then that could record all 16 MIDI channels at once. And then once you go to the MIDI part, we could do is go to dissolve part and then split by MIDI channel, and then you could have each of the different MIDI channels. But you may have to actually just record that as audio, as many of the workstation keyboards, I'm not sure which Yamaha you have, and there's varying degrees of them, if they actually transmit the MIDI information that's being generated out of the keyboard, or if it's just strictly designed to be done internally. All right. So we see Stefan checking in from Sweden. We also have Arnold just saying hello. We have Alexander Plasko saying hello. We have Jeff Stanton from London, Jazz Dude from Germany. We have Benny from Sweden. We have Jan from Cubase Index. We have Filter Freak with saying Nanu Nanu. So, been a long time since I've seen a Mork and Mindy reference. Thanks for that. Brings back memories. All right, we have Robbie Bowling from Texas, from Dallas, Texas. All right, so we have K Edits saying hello. Dallas LaRue has a question. I know how to import a project and find the exact tempo. I'm having trouble then lining it up exactly with the grid and the click track. Okay. Okay, so if you know how to find the tempo, so I'm not sure if it's like a audio file. So we'll go ahead and just kind of take a look at this. So say we'll do this project. Okay, so let me just, and if we put our click track on, so we can hear that the click track doesn't really have any correlation with the audio itself. So the audio is kind of, you know, it's a live group, so they could be just kind of fluctuating. So to get it lined up, if we just come to our tempo detection, so you can do this for audio or MIDI, so go to project to tempo detection, and we'll say analyze. All right, so we'll just kind of listen to it. So now we could have our grid kind of lined up to directly to the, so our tempo is, and our grid is lined up to the audio performance. And if what it's going to do is to automatically create a tempo map and a signature track. So if you have a pickup note, you may just want to say the downbeat is right here, and you could define the meter. So, because what the tempo detection does is it analyzes for the beat. So once we're here, we can now say this is where the downbeat is. So at that point, you could now have the grid matching either the MIDI performance or the audio performance. So let me know if that's helpful, Dallas. All right, so Arnold is saying hi from Germany. Okay, so a question, how to color the send tracks. Okay. So let's say if I have a number of tracks here, I'll just go back to this project and okay, so we'll take a number of audio tracks here, and let's say I want to add a send effect to these tracks. So right click, add track, and we will choose add effects channel to the track. So let's say, okay, I want a stereo delay. We'll hit add track. So once we have our effects channel here added, we could just at this point, we'll see in the color field, you could just kind of change it just by clicking right there. So in the upper left-hand corner of the inspector tab, make sure that you have the top inspector tab open. And then you'll see this little arrow, and then you could just change the color of the particular track just by clicking on your colors. All right. Wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. We have Parabot 2 also on. Great to see Sable Winters. All right, and John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And We have John Barry checking in from a very sunny English Riviera, so that's great. All right, and we see Soren from Sweden also. Okay, so we have a question from Ted Springman in Los Angeles area. Hi, Greg. Does Curve EQ also apply amplitude from one audio track to another as well as EQ? If not, what is the best tool in Cubase to match volume? So if you had to match volume between two tracks, so let's say if I was here, it's probably just doing normalizing. So curve EQ is going to be predominantly for EQs, so it's not really for doing like different amplitude of audio files. So let's say I'll just delete these files. So let's say I have another track that I will put in. Okay, let me just... All right, and I'm just going to bring this volume down on this particular track so that we'll have a difference. Okay, so let's say I have this project here, and I'll activate this project. So let's say we have two tracks that have different gain, different volume levels. So let's say if I jump here, so I could take the volume level of one, let's go to your audio, and go to statistics. And once we do this, we could see what our, we could look at it and see again kind of what our loudness is. So let's say, okay, our loudness is minus 11.4. So what I want to do now is to take this project. So I want this file to match the level of that. So we'll come over here, go to audio, to processes, and we will go to normalize. And then we'll say, okay, let's use our loudness and say minus 11.4. And now when we just go back and forth, that will give us kind of consistent volume levels between them. So just figure out what the, go to your audio, select the event that you want to have as a volume reference, and go to, again, statistics. That will do an analysis of the file, and you could see what your levels are right there, and then you could match that with another file using audio processing to normalize, and then you could just kind of match away. All right, let me just get rid of that processing. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. All right, so we see Sable Winters checking in from San Francisco Bay Area. We have Andrew Holcroft, says Digger from Dartmoor, Devon. Thanks for being on. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Can you remind me how to import a single instrument, i.e. a snare, to replace a snare and event already in a project? Thanks. Okay, so let's say, I'm not sure if it is one that is, I'm not sure if it is one that's like kind of broken out. We'll show both two different methods of doing kind of like a quick drum replacement. Let me just find a quick, see if it's in my list of recent projects. Okay, I'll just open it. All right, so if the snare is kind of broken up, you know, into different, where it's going to be like one single file that's repeated over and over again, what you could do, so let's say we'll take something like this, where I want to take this kick. I'll go to Media Bay and we could come over to loops and we'll just say, okay, I want to take, let's just say, okay, I want to go to kicks. And let's say while this is playing, so what I could do now is just kind of hold down the shift key and drag over a sample. And if it's the same sample that's being used repeatedly, if you hold down the shift key, it says, do you want to wish to modify all events that refer to the same audio material? Say yes. And we could just kind of try different samples and drag and drop it right onto any of the pads. So just hold down shift and double click like that. Now, if it is like a, let's say maybe like a live band recording, what you could do is just come over here and work with hit points, and hit points will allow you to determine and to create MIDI notes. So let's say I want to take my snare here. Say as my snare kicks in here. So I can just double click and we'll go to our hit points editor, and we just wanted to kind of find where the snares are and not like tracks are bleeding through. And in this case, I have a MIDI instrument loaded, like a groove agent. So all I would have to do is, when we're in this sample editor here, go to hit points, and once we've kind of determined what the hit points are, we'll say create MIDI notes. And then I'll just say, let's put MIDI notes onto D1, and that will trigger the snare. So now we have this part. And if I wanted to just mute my snare, then I could just tune it. So, and if you wanted to replace that snare with a different snare, again, you could just kind of come over and say, okay, let's find snare drums. And then I could just drag and drop my snare drum. Let's see, that's D1. So while it's playing, okay, let's say I don't want that one. So let's say now I could just drag and drop within the instrument. snare come back in here. So you get two different approaches for replacing snare drums. So let me know if that works for you, Steve. All right, we have Capital Razor saying hi from Canada. Thanks for being on today. All right. All right. All right, we see Steve Green means in Groove Agent, so probably the second approach to that. All right. All right, great to see Kevin M. Glad you can make it to the live stream today. We hope you're feeling better. All right, so we see from Andrew Holcroft, my spacebar has started playing a MIDI note and adding one to the MIDI roll. Note, yeah, I saw that. Okay, so it says when your spacebar is playing, so it could be that, you know, I'm not sure if you have, let's say if I come here and I turn on my virtual keyboard, so that's still doing transport. It could be, you know, I wonder, you know, if you have, my first inclination would be that maybe you have something in the MIDI remote that is causing to be triggered. So try going to like your MIDI port setup. You know, so I'm not sure if the space bar on a computer keyboard, I mean, generally, you know, doesn't trigger MIDI notes, but I would see if you have any like generic remotes, Mackie, Hueys, any of these, and try to set it to not connected and see if that message from the snare drum is maybe being interpreted by another MIDI controller. And again, you could go to your studio setup and go to the MIDI port setup, and you could also try just unchecking in all MIDI inputs on like controller ports and see if that makes a difference as well. So it could be like sometimes you may have like something that is, you know, when you hit this space bar or when you hit a button like a transport for start or stop from a controller, that it's actually just sending a MIDI note. And if you have it set to transmit in all MIDI notes, so again, studio setup, MIDI port setup, and you know, try to see if you take one of these off, if that changes the behavior, and it probably will. Generally, you know, the MIDI keyboard doesn't get reassigned, but you know, like space bars on other controllers that transmit MIDI can pretty easily. All right, so we have Mark checking in from near Berlin. This is his first time on the channel to take a look without a question, so it's a great thing. Welcome to the live stream, and just ask whatever questions you have on Steinberg products. We're glad that you can make it today. Okay, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it. And since it's a warm day here in Washington, D.C., we're looking forward to Michael distributing all the ice cream. We even like it when it's cold outside. Okay, so we have First Cause, says I'm making a reggae beat at the moment. Saw this live, so good luck with your beat. All right, so we see from Alessandro Braz asks, when I zoom in to some of my audio waveforms, it's squared and not perfectly round like a sine wave. Is this normal? Does it have to do with my settings? So it could really depend on, you know, what type of audio that you have in your system. So if we're zooming in here, for instance, you know, at a certain level, you could see. But I'll just show a quick example. So let's say if I, let's add an audio track. Okay. I'll make it stereo. And I want to send this track to a group channel. And then I want to add another audio track with the group as the input. Okay, so I'm going to go to my audio 1, and let's go to, on this one, I just want to put like a test tone generator. So, and I'm going to turn the volume down in the control room so you guys don't have to necessarily listen to it, but we'll go under tools and say, okay, let's get to our test tone generator. And let's say I just wanted to put a square wave in. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just record that square wave. Okay, so we'll stop recording. So now, so depending on the waveform itself, so let's say if we make this obnoxiously large and we zoom in, you could see that, you know, depending on what type of material it is, you'll get different waveform representation. So as we recorded a square wave, or if you record other, you know, signal tone types, you could just see that reflected directly inside of the audio waveform as well. So it could really depend upon the material itself. So if it's not sinusoidal, it could be just material that's not really, that, you know, that waveform doesn't represent. So I don't think there's anything wrong with your system. Okay, okay, so we see from Arnold asking, suppose you want to create an Alberti pattern starting from a chord track, example, lowest note, highest note, middle note, and highest note, which approach is most effective to achieve this? Okay, so I'm not that familiar with Alberti, but let's go ahead and see if we could replicate that on the chord track. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's get to our chord track set up. So maybe if we just adjust the root position, so let's see if there's one of these options. Let me just reread the intervals. Lowest note, highest note, middle note, and highest note. Okay, so let's say, so I'm not that familiar, I'm sorry, with Alberti patterns. So it says starting from the chord track, example, lowest note, highest note, middle note, and highest note. So there are different inversions here that you could use. So let's say if we're on a G chord, you could see kind of the different inversions that are available. So and then there's, you know, like second inversion drop. So this, you know, where you could, you know, drop 2. So maybe one of those. And another area that you could go to is if you go to setup voicing, that here you could choose like the highest, you know, the range of notes, and you could choose, you know, not only like, you know, different voicing options there, but maybe if you could, I'm ignorant of Alberti patterns. Maybe if you could explain that a little bit, or if anyone else knows, then that would be helpful for me. Sorry about that. All right, wonderful to see Randy Lee on the live stream. All right, so we have a question from Benny. How do I get the same volume of, for example, 10 songs in Wavelab 11 Pro? I use montage. It's good to use a montage. We were told, and someone said in the last live stream that the montage should be thrown away. So I like the montage. All right, so let's go take a quick look. So if we want to have kind of consistent volume levels, so let's come over here, just load a quick project. Okay, so let's say we have let me see if I have it as a separate. Just see if I can find this real quick. Okay, I'll probably just try to make it real quick. Let's see if I can. All right, so let's say we have something like this where we have different levels in our audio montage. And now what we want to do with the audio montage is to make these levels kind of all the same. So what we could do is if we come over here to, I think it's under process, we could choose meta normalizer. So within the montage, so we'll go to meta normalizer. And what I want to do is we could choose to match the loudest clip, or I could say this is like the target volume I want. So I'll say match the loudness of the active clip. And we could choose to do this either in some different modes. So you could do it in so we could use that as our reference. We could just come over here and have different options for if you want to limit peaks. So as soon as I do this, I'll hit apply. And it's going to go through. And kind of do the magic so we could have consistent volume levels. Just like that. So come over to process and then go to meta normalizer, and then that will allow you to kind of have the same volume levels consistently across like your 10 songs on a CD. Great feature. All right. All right. So we see from Ted Springman question, is converting an audio snare track to MIDI for drum replacement purposes still subject to the relatively low resolution timing of the MIDI spec? In other words, will super fast roll sound quantized? So no. Because it could depend upon the DAW. So in Cubase, all the MIDI, like the timing resolution is based at the sample level. So we go down to, so it's not a specific PPQ. So if I wanted to take this particular note, let's switch our timing here to samples. I could move the start and end position of the notes, by an individual sample. So you could see it just move ever so slightly here. So that won't have any impact. Some DAWs that have, perhaps aren't based on the sample position and are doing 480 or 960 parts per quarter note, it could change it. I would say that most snare drums, aren't going to be subjected to that, but we could go down to the sample level in Cubase, so it's not a problem. It's not going to affect the timing from doing an audio to MIDI extraction. All right, wonderful to see Harry Olive. All right, and wonderful also to see Spike Williams, checking in from Rhonda, Wales. Okay, so we just see I want to be able to switch between instruments while recording live. What's the best way to go about it? So let's say I have like a synth bass here. Let me move something out of the way. And here I have a Rhodes patch. So if I just wanted to switch between the instruments, one of the settings that you could have is, so I'm not sure if you wanted them on different tracks or if you just wanted to, to switch instruments on the same track. So let's say I'm just going to use my arrow key here. So let's go ahead and we will start with the Rhodes. And we'll go ahead and hit record. I go down to my synth bass. And we go up to the Rhodes again. And then we'll go to the synth bass. And up to the Rhodes. So you could just switch back and forth that way. Now, if it was something like a program change that you wanted to capture, you could actually just, if it's like for an external MIDI device, you could just, as you switch a sound, that may automatically send a program change. And when you go to edit the particular sounds, like for external keyboards, you could just come right here and say, okay, we wanted this sound here, and switch sounds there with like a MIDI program change. But you could definitely kind of switch back and forth between instruments when recording live. So let me know if that works for you, AJ Soundbites. Okay, Michael Teams asks, howdy Greg, how to import a song from Cubase to Wavelab? I've not figured that out yet. Okay, so let's say I want to take just, one is once you export the file, you could just simply choose to open the file into Wavelab, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a, but there is a direct link. So, once you have an audio file that's been created by Cubase, I will show you another method as well. So let's say I just want to take just maybe a portion of this. So I'm going to set my left and right locators. And now I will go to File, to Export Audio Mixdown. And I want to export my stereo mix down. And then we see after export. And what I want to do here is to say open in Wavelab Pro 11. So now I'll say export the audio. Then it's going to launch Wavelab 11. And at this point, we could just hit play. And that's taking your file directly over. So again, just go to your file menu to export audio mixdown, and you'll see after export just say open into Wavelab Pro or whatever Wavelab version you have directly there. All right. Okay, reading through comments, my chat field just jumped. See, lots of questions in my future. All right, just all right, so we see from John Mooney, Greg, could you give us an overview of the mastering mode? So if we start a project, we'll come over here and say, let's do a new project. So there is in Cubase a mastering template. So let's say we want to do stereo mastering. All right, and this is just going to open up some plugins like compression. So let's come and import the audio file from here. So let's just say, okay, I want to do and now that we have this, so we could think of the mastering template as really just kind of like processing that's been applied. So we come here and say,
let you know what I'm about and what is in, what is outside in the cold. I walk alone to my own beat, and when we meet, let me tell you lots about me.
So if we wanted to kind of take the compression off here,
let me tell you lots about myself.
So if we wanted to apply compression, so if you want to apply different amounts of dynamics, or say, okay, we want to run it through limiter now. And if we wanted to bypass these, so if you want to kind of tweak with dynamics, and if you wanted to get more output gain, so it's a way of processing, like, what a lot of people would do in mastering, running like, compression, dynamics, and maybe EQ is pretty typical. But a lot of times if I'm doing mastering, Steinberg does have a dedicated mastering program, Wavelab, which we just saw, and that has a lot of, different delivery formats and being able to burn CDs and, add all the metadata into particular projects. So, but you could, if you're just thinking of mastering more as doing processing on the DAW, you could use the mastering template, or you could just kind of load in the stereo mix and do processing on it directly inside of Cubase as well. All right, so we have Edward James checking in from Akron, Ohio. Thanks for joining us today. A good friend of mine I used to do a lot of Cubase stuff with. Lives in Akron area. All right, and All right, and we see music for World Peace Records, Taylor from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see how can I use my expression pedal to control the wah-wah in VST amp rack. Okay, so let's say we have VST amp rack here. I don't have an expression pedal hooked up, so I'll use my, I'm going to use my modulation wheel. So I'll take my modulation wheel and I'll turn that into like an expression pedal. So I'm going to, let's just add a MIDI track. Okay. And on this, I'm going to go to my input transformer, and you don't have to do this part. I'm just doing it because I don't have an expression pedal. So let's do it on a track. So we're going to transform. So right now when we look at my MIDI inserts, we can see that as I go to my MIDI monitor that we're going to have controller 1. So I want to turn my controller 1 into controller 11. So let's say we want to insert, we're going to say type is equal to controller, and if you have an expression pedal you don't have to worry about this, and we'll say value 1 of the controller equals 1, and now we will come here and say to value 1 we want to add 10. So now my modulation wheel is spitting out CC 11. All right, so now we'll fake our controller. So I'm going to come directly to my, I'm going to load up the VST amp rack under distortion. And let's go to, let's say our post effects, and we'll select a wah-wah. Okay, so we're going to first of all turn on the wah-wah, and I think what we need to do is just to go to this MIDI track here, and now that we've added that, let's go to our output, and here's our VST amp rack MIDI in. So I think what we want to do now is all right, so I think that, you know, what you do is add a MIDI track, and then we'll assign that to the guitar port. And we can see that as we, and one other way that we could do it, we could take a different approach also. If you have your wah-wah that's controlling that, let's come over to our guitar part, and we could do a quick controls. So I'm going to click on learn, and then we can see the wah-wah pedal right there. And you could set up your quick controls to respond to channel 1. So let's say I'll turn on my trusty CC121 controller here with quick controls. So you could just set up a quick control of your wah-wah and be able to control it directly. I'll just come here to this. I'm just going to click on learn again, and then take learn mode off, and then you could control it just through quick controls as well. So that way you could set up either as a MIDI remote, or if you wanted to just go to studio setup to quick controls, that you could at this point, say quick control 1 is coming from your address, set that to 11, and then you could use your wah-wah, use your expression pedal to control the wah-wah in the VST amp rack. Hope you're doing well, Taylor. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so we have Paul Jason asks, he's from Mauritius. I'm using Cubase 5 and having problem when mix down finish. It's not reading the track on any player I have. So one of the things you could always do, just to see if it is, one is check, whatever player that you're having, make sure that, it's capable of playing back the resolution and sample rate that you have. But one quick test to do to check an export is just come over here and do an audio mix down. And like we showed earlier, exporting into Wavelab, you can say export and create an audio track. And now at this point, we could just create the audio track. And then you could see the audio files directly. You could see the audio file that's created, and then you could see that it's, that it's playing back as expected. But make sure that when you are doing an export audio mix down, if you're using something like a media player type of thing, and you do your export audio mix down and you're set to 32-bit floating point 96K, a lot of those media players may not play back that particular file format. So but try exporting and making sure that the export is exporting correctly. So you want to come over here and just on the after export, just choose to create an audio track. And from there, you could probably get a pretty good sense of if the file itself is fine and playing back in the project, then you know that your file is good. So. All right, so we have Jovanovic 3D, who's saying hello to the Cubase Nation from Slovenia. Glad you can make it today. All right, so we have a question. I have a piano part with 2 hands, but both are straight quantized to the grid. How to slightly random piano parts to make it more human feel? Just a little, thanks. Okay, so let's say I want to take... let's see if we have a piano part that's we want to kind of maybe change the feel of slightly to make it a little more human, perhaps like some timing. Okay, so let's say if we're listening to this piano, so one of the things you can do on the MIDI or instrument track is if you go, make sure that you right click and that you have MIDI modifiers open. And then once you have the MIDI modifiers, at this point you could choose to kind of randomize different elements such as position. So you can say, okay, I just want to take the timing and maybe randomize it by different ticks here. So kind of very straight. You hear how the chords are maybe rolled a little more. And we'll do kind of an extreme amount here. So you can be a bit judicious with it. So, try just different amounts. And that could allow you to randomize the position by varying amounts. So it's not playing back everything just the same way every single time, where it's not perfectly on the beat. So try experimenting with that. All right, so we see Sable Winters picked up Spectralayers Pro 9 and T guitar in the spring sale. So she's looking forward to playing around with them. So congratulations. it'll be great purchases. I always like virtual guitar stuff because I'm just a dumb bass player. Okay, so we have Music for World Peace Records. Taylor asks, why does the preview in the loop browser sometimes have fixed volume, other times the volume slider changes volume? So generally, like when we're going into, like, let's say our loop browser, here we could have different, let me just check my preview. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure I have my control room preview set here. So let's get to preferences and just check one. Okay, so generally it's always going to be the one times I've seen, maybe it's when you get into more MIDI stuff. So let's say if I'm here, I'm just looking at drum loops, and I'll just turn this up so we can hear it a little better. So that this is always adjustable for the volume. And let's say if we go to maybe like MIDI stuff, let's see. So even the MIDI stuff here is allowing us to adjust the volumes. So I'm not sure. I don't recall ever being kind of locked. But let me just see if it's yeah, so I haven't come across that, but if you have any of like the built-in loops that it's causing, but I haven't really seen it be fixed. But let's see if maybe if I drag a loop in, still always can change, is always kind of able to change kind of as I would expect. So, but if there's a particular loop that you come across, let me know, Taylor. All right, so Taylor asks, when an instrument license is transferred from eLicenser to Cubase 12, will that instrument be disabled for earlier versions of Cubase? So no. So the individual license, it's just how any version of Cubase would see the license. So whether it was on eLicenser or whether it's on, or whether it's on the Steinberg licensing, as long as you have a valid license, it's available to run in earlier versions of Cubase. So it doesn't, it's not necessarily a Cubase 12 license. It's just, the license, instead of being on the USB eLicenser, is now on the Steinberg licensing. So they're all available to use in earlier versions as well. All right, we have a question for Taylor. In studio audio system setup, audio priority, what's the difference between normal and boost? So usually when you get into this is, if you have like older systems, so let's say we get to your audio system, and then you have your audio priority here. So this could be, okay, I want the audio to have priority, the audio playback to have priority over the visual playback, for instance. So if you have an older computer and you're really kind of pushing it at that point, this is kind of the balance between audio playback and video playback, I believe. So what you could do is, if you're really kind of running on the edge, maybe you could have some little graphic anomalies, and this will kind of change the priority to boost the priority so that you could have consistent audio playback. Okay. All right, so we see hacking instructions from First Cause. So yeah, we don't need to promote any, ways of pirating any music software. So, all right, so we see Kevin just already asked if we could do a demo for the new Cubase. So, as I sent in my text earlier, Kevin, that I wasn't able to listen to any of your tracks. So if you have another way of sharing, that'd be great. All right, so we have Hotase from Chile. Thanks for joining us. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. All right, we have Hero Negroho Official, says Cubase Indonesia watching. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to the live streams. All right. All right, so we see a question from Sam. Sometimes when exporting tracks, there is a plus dB sound, a plus 12 dB sound. It sounds like a constant beep sound when Cubase freezes. It's very random, and I cannot figure out what this is. Any ideas? So usually, all right. So usually when I hear a situation like that, it's sometimes trial versions of plugins. So that they're not used in full versions. A trial version may just put out like a 1K sine tone or sine wave to work with. So, if you're doing kind of, if it's, it could be that there's maybe a trial version of a plugin that is kind of just letting you not use it for full production that causes a sound like that. So look in your project to make sure that you don't really have any trial versions. It's probably going to be like a trial version plugin that's causing that beep. Okay, so you see from John Barry, it just says, Alberti, it's just an arpeggio. Thank you for the clarification, John. All right, so if we want to do like an arpeggio from the chord track, we could do that pretty easily. So let's just go to this project. Okay, so let's say I wanted to take my Rhodes patch here. So I'm going to take the chord track. All right, so I wanted to say, so when we listen to this, we could say, let's use monitor tracks. All right, so we're listening. So what I could do now is just place this particular track and go to like a MIDI insert, and let's just put on like a quick arpeggi, and we'll say, okay, let's do 16th notes, and now when I play, it's going to play the chords on this track because I chose to use monitor tracks. I put this track in monitor enable, and on this track I just put an arpeggiator. So you could just do kind of different arpeggios like that. And thank you so much, John, for the clarification. And it's my new thing I learned on the live stream today, so I'm not as ignorant as I was earlier. All right, so we see Andrew Holcroft just says, okay, thanks, Greg. I have remotes plus Stream Deck. So yeah, make sure your Stream Deck isn't transmitting a MIDI note as well. So it could be your Stream Deck because it often fires off keys. Okay. It seems like Michael Teens got 3 inches of rain last night, so that's a lot. Your property's okay. Okay, Spike Williams just says he's loving his new Iconica library. It is stunning. What a bargain. So yeah, it is really wonderful library. All right. Tomos just see a comment. I've been using Cubase for 20 years and still haven't dived into all the menu options. Yeah, I'm the one that has to figure it out for other people, but everyone could run Cubase how they want to and still be doing great work. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see that Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of fresh key lime pie ice cream. That's very good. My son will appreciate it. He loves his ice cream. All right, so a question. Hi, Greg. Could you please explain how to assign different MIDI CC messages to parameters in synths like Retrolog? Struggling to make it work. Okay, so if we have, let's say Retrologs, I think we have, this is a Retrolog. Okay, so I'll go ahead, open it up. So a lot of the instruments, you can come here and just say, okay, I have a something that's transmitting a MIDI CC message. Let me just clear this remote. Okay, so right now, like I have this sound. Let me just. All right, let me just. So a lot of times, what you could actually do is just brain cramp on. So as you're playing, let's say, okay, I wanted to assign, so you could just right click and learn CC. Right click, learn CC, and now you could just assign different CCs to different parameters just by right clicking and moving the parameter. So if I wanted to move this one here, so let's say learn CC again. Let's say we go to move my third fader on my unit, so we could control different parameters. So that's how you could do it on a lot of plugins. You could also just, if you're using like the MIDI remote, so let's say if we jump back to our MIDI remote, All right, and I'll just add a quick MIDI remote here. So I'll just say, okay, we're going to do Choi sauce. All right, and I have a 100. Okay, so I'll just re-enable this. Okay, so another way of doing, just about any parameter for instruments is also just to come over here and then you could right click, and a lot of them would say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. And then you could just move the fader and apply mapping. So if you're using the MIDI remote, you could just say, okay, right click, move the fader that you want and say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. And then you could just apply, and then you could just adjust the different parameters here. So we'll close this window. I could adjust my key follow switch. Let's adjust a frequency here by moving number 2. So if you're using the MIDI remote, just right click and pick up for remote mapping and move the fader and double click, and then you could assign, virtually any plugin parameter that way as well. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we have Tomos checking in from Brighton, UK. Thanks for joining us. All right. All right, let me just, my chat field just jumped. Let me just find where I was. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, can a down mix preset be set up in control room below the stereo mono option so I can hear what a mix sounds like with different band limited filtering to replicate lo-fi listening? So I think, let's say if we wanted to take, let's just take like a multi-track and we'll play this back. Okay, so let's say we have, and let me just revert this quickly. That's processing. All right, so if we wanted to A/B lo-fi, so let's say, all right, so let's come over here to like our inserts. Alright, so say we want to. Alright, so let's say we wanted to, let's say that'll be our lo-fi. sound. All right, so it says, can a down mix preset be set up in a control room below the stereo mono options so I can hear what the sounds like? Okay, so it's not really, we might be able to do it. So let's say we have our graphic EQ, and I'll just say, just call this lo-fi. Okay, so let's say if all right, so let's say if we come over here to guitars and let's say I want to put in the lo-fi plugin here. All right, so let's say if we have this set up, so it's not going to be directly under like down mix, but let's say if we're playing along and I wanted to listen to, let me send everything to QMix 1. There's a number of ways that you could take it and automatically just, you know, turn it on and off with a MIDI remote or through like generic remote. But let's come and say I want to go to cues here. And I want to, we'll just set this up. So I'm going to turn on QMix 1. And we will use the same mix level. And let's say our current pan levels. All right, so now when I come over, we can say, okay, now I want to monitor QMix 1. And that's just going through. So this way we could have kind of a lo-fi set up in the mono, like within one of the one of the Q sends. So you could listen to your mix versus the Q, or if you wanted to, maybe just as easy to just turn that on and off. But let me know if like the location of being like under the down mix presets is critical for you, but you should be able to just, you know, come right over here and, you know, if it's right here or if it's, you know, part of the inserts on the main area, or if you wanted to do it, you know, via QSend. So, you know, a couple different approaches, but it's not necessarily a down mix preset. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us today. Great to have you on. Okay, so just see, is there a way to achieve the following workflow? All right, looking for follow-ups. We'll see. All right. So, and this is from the appeared one. So maybe I don't see any other follow-up after the comment. Is there a way to achieve the following workflow? Or so maybe it was too long. So, but let me, you know, maybe it's coming later. But you know, but I don't see the question right after. All right, so Alessandro asks, can you create a feedback loop with an effects channel where you put the input of an audio channel as the effects channel and have it sent as a send to the same effects channel? So generally we try to avoid feedback loops, and usually we're kind of applauded for that. So, but you know, there may be some other ways of doing it, but there isn't a way to create a feedback loop inside of Cubase. So we work hard just to make sure that doesn't happen. All right. So we see from Ted Springman, just says, awesome, Cubase is simply the best. I think it's pretty cool as well. All right. So we see John Costigan even giving some further clarification that Alberti bass is an alternating left-hand bass pattern, example 16th notes, and sounds like Mozart. So yeah, so I think we could limit, you know, if you really wanted to take the limit of that, you know, we could be a little more creative with it. So let's say so if I wanted to take maybe chords, let's see if we could get this set up. All right, so if I wanted to duplicate this track, okay, so say, all right, so let's say I want to do something like this, or I want one hand to be split. Okay, so let's say if we wanted to do split, we could say, okay, I only want this note to be, so let's go to my input transformer. And I want to filter, we'll say notes, for value 1 is less than we'll say C2, C3, okay. And then we could actually just kind of split this. And on this one, we could say, and there's probably, I could probably come up with a more clever way of doing this. But we'll say filter notes that are, let's say, we'll take value 1 is bigger than C3. And let's say in this one, I want it to have arpeggios. So now I play. And now I could play this hand. All right, and let me just make. So I could take my right hand so I could kind of take one, I could split the range of notes and have one of them go through the arpeggiator and the other not, based on the pitch, like that. So maybe that's closer to Alberti arpeggios. Okay. All right, so we see Michael Teams. It says, thanks, Greg. Got it. All right. All right, so we have Westar just saying, hi, everyone from England. Love the streams. So thanks for joining us. All right, so we see, hi, Greg Ness here from Holland. Why are there no photos on the input and output tracks, faders, I mean, in the mixer? So when you look at kind of the mixer view, let's go to, let's just make sure that we have pictures enabled. So, I think that since it's not an actual instrument, that, once we come over here, for the actual track that contains data, we could put a picture. But, in essence, what it is, in the eyes of Cubase for our inputs here, is just an actual audio input. So it's not a physical source, and this input could constantly be changing. So let's say you have a 2-input audio interface. You record a microphone. You record let's say your guitar, a bass, a keyboard, whereas the tracks themselves actually contain the media. These don't contain the media, or more of, we'll think of it as a conduit or a pathway. And these pathways for outputs or inputs could be used for multiple different devices. So that's why these will generally kind of be the same and consistent. So you can say, okay, now when I come over here, this is, my bass drum. And, we could see that this track is always going to play drums, but these inputs and outputs are going to be, feeding, they're dynamically allocated and changed throughout the course of a project. So I think that's the logic behind it. All right, so we have Drazi Eternal, who's joining us. He's listening now. Thanks for joining us. It says, Drowsy Eternal says his desktop died, but it's back now in a new motherboard. So that is a good thing, being able to kind of stagger upgrades. I did it recently with one of my computers about 2 years ago. All right. All right, we have a question. Is there a way to change the MIDI mapping of my Akai MPC to use it for Groove Agent? MPC has different layout, pad 1 on C sharp, 1, pad 2 on C, tries to make new drum map, which works. So usually I would think that you probably have a transpose function on the Akai, but if you wanted to kind of change it within Groove Agent itself, so, usually the lower pattern MPC is always C1 for memory. I haven't worked with them since MPC 60 days, and when I was working in a studio way back when, and a completely different life. But if you don't want to transpose the keyboard, so let's say you wanted this, so we see that is C1. If you click on this below the lower right hand pad, we'll see this little icon here. It says use hardware controller. At that point, you could just say right click and edit learn MIDI trigger note, hit the pad, and that will assign it. And go to the next pad, right click, edit learn MIDI trigger note, hit the pad, and that will capture the MIDI note from the pad. But you don't see those options available until you actually click here on the lower right hand corner. So make sure you do that. But there's probably, I'm sure it's not default for C#1 for like the first pad. So, check to see if your Akai has been transposed, but if you don't want to transpose the Akai from what MIDI note it's transmitting at the controller level, again, just click here and then right click, edit, learn MIDI trigger note, hit the note, and that will capture it, and then you could assign it that way. All right, wonderful to see Jason Sykes checking in from South Shields, England. And we have RCal773 checking in from Chi-Town. All right, and we have Rodham Pick says, great to be here. Thank you for Cubase, the best. All right, glad you can make it. And RCal773 just got Spectralayers 9 and his mind is blown. All right, so Kevin is looking for song lyrics. If anyone wants to give him song lyrics. All right. All right, wonderful to see Nick just popping in and say hi and to whack the like button. So if you have learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and that allows us to continue to do these live streams, and also tell your friends about it as well. All right, so Kevin asks, do you think Cubase will have Siri functionality in Cubase in the future? So I don't think so. So I don't think it's, you'll say, Siri, write a drum beat, so I don't, so, and I think Siri would be kind of tied to Apple. So I don't think that many other companies, many other third-party things will respond to Siri. I think it's tied to Apple, but you could reach out to Apple and see if they want to release their software development kit for it. All right, Michael Teams is imploring people in all caps to whack the like button. So, and he just had 3 inches of rain, so we should all follow his idea. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce. He's hoping everyone is safe and well. He's dashing in and out between students this evening. Great to see you, Michael. And even though he was quick, Michael Teams has granted him 1 gallon of lemon custard ice cream. We have to figure out, we have to say 2.2 liters or something for people on the people from that know the metric system. So. Okay, so we have a question from Lars who asks, how can I remove an automation? When I remove an automation track, the automation is still there and it is applied on the track. Okay, so if it is automation, so automation is generally not on the track. So let's say if I come here and draw in automation, so if we just kind of shift, double click, and hit delete, you could do that. Now, when you say it's on the track, that might be kind of clip gain. So if it looks something like where you have the pencil to change the volume, something like that, and you want to remove that, if you go to audio menu and then just click on remove volume curve. So again, if it's the volume curve on the actual event, the pre-fader volume, so just go to audio to remove volume curve. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, great to see Braxel on. All right, so we see, could Cubase come with their own kind of wave, or does Bill Gates still, does Steinberg have to pay royalties, or is that royalty free? I forgot to ask you. So I think while the wave file format was developed by Microsoft. I'm not sure if anyone owns it, so I don't think that you have to pay any royalties to have WAV files or to utilize WAV files in your project. And there's no codecs, so you don't have to pay for any codecs as well. Okay. All right, so we see, hi Greg, Vincent here, long time since. I was wondering if there's any way to group draw modulation for several MIDI instrument tracks. To put in other words, can you link tracks when you edit modulation? I'm currently doing some strings. I was wondering if it's possible somehow. Many thanks. All right, so let me just open up different project. Let's see. Yeah, this should work. All right, so let's say I want to select like these parts here, these three parts. I'll just do something that'll be separate. So let's take violin, viola, and so we look at these three events here, and I'm going to switch to look at, let's say, modulation for all of them. All right, so when we have modulation, so I'm going to just go between the different parts. So one of the things that was added, so I don't know of a way, you know, if you hit record, you know, so let's say if I'm here and I record enabled these particular tracks, that I could so now I just move my mod wheel. So now when we go to look at the modulation here, all right, let me just, all right, let me just check, make sure. Okay, so I'm just going to record modulation onto these three tracks. All right, so we have the same modulation curve on all of the events. So let's look at our three tracks. So, and usually that could be the fastest way to do it. So I'm going to hold down Control Command, and now I'll just go to kind of my full screen editor so we can switch, and let's go ahead and just look at modulation data. All right, so there isn't a way to, you know, it's going to be kind of entered in separately, but if I come, let's say if I draw in, I go to violin 1, let's say to cello, viola, so we see that we had the same modulation. So what I'm going to do is just kind of draw in. I'm going to select that particular automation, or that CC data rather. I'm going to copy. Let's come over here, and I'm going to hit Alt plus V, and that will paste at origin. So, and then just come over here, and not Control V, but Alt plus V. And now we could just come over here. So I could copy the modulation data between one track and paste it, but it's not linked as you're doing editing on it. So, but you can select it, copy it, and then use Alt V instead of Control or Command plus V, which is typical paste, because Alt or Option plus V is going to be paste at origin. So that's a quick way of making a change in one, going to another track, and you could even make a macro to do it, because you could go down to next track, you know, and then paste, etc. So, all right. Okay. So we see autoplay, listen to files, doesn't work for me anymore. So I'm not sure if it's what part of Cubase it's doing it in. So let's say if we're here. So I'm not sure if it's like this play that's not working, or but if you're not hearing it, it could be because the control room is not active. So, or if you're importing files, let's come over to, we'll say import audio files. Okay, so let's come over here and that's kind of going out through my computer audio system. So if I switch that to here, you should probably hear it, or well, switch it to this so that I can. So, but let me know kind of where you're doing the autoplay, and if you have the control room activated. All right, so we see just clarification. It says no. In Pool, I can listen, pre-play, and listen to theme buttons are frozen weird. All right, so let's look into Pool for this. So I will come over to our Pool window, and let's. So make sure that like maybe like there's this little preview volume that's up. And if I wanted to just come here. So make sure that that volume is enabled there. And so let me know if you're doing that and if it's going through the control room as well. All right. So we see how are Absolute 6 and Amped Electra licensed? Mine says verification pending. What does that mean? Am I missing a step? So sometimes what could be helpful to do if you see a verification pending, I'll just see if we could get my activation manager open. Sometimes it doesn't like it if Cubase is open at the same time. Well, all right, so let's say we go to your Absolute 6. So if you have the Absolute 6, that would probably have all the licensing for you. So let's say if we go to activate it, like I'll have Amped Electra, you know, make sure that you're actually, like here I have my Absolute 6, and this contains licenses for, the Grand, Groove Agent, Amped Electra, and others. So if you installed it as an independent program as opposed to part of the Absolute 6 collection from the Steinberg Download Assistant, so let's say if we come to the Steinberg Download Assistant here, so, and then when you go to like your downloads, because you could, you see it as part of you'll see Amped Electra, directly here, and that is what's carrying the license as opposed to, the individual sold separately license. So check to make sure. So it should be one single license activation for Absolute 6 that will include the Amped Electra and all the other instruments. So, and we see from Sable also Spectralayers Pro 9 licensing process. So once you just simply go to the Download Assistant, so we'll open this up again. Should have read the next question before closing it. Once you get the download access code, you want to make sure that this is signed into your account. Just enter the download access code here, and that will go through, install, download, and authorize it for you. So it's kind of a simplified process. So just get your download access code that came with probably the email or the package that you got it in, and just simply choose to put it in there, and in the background, as long as it's logged into your My Account, you should be all good to go. And we see Sable Winters just saying Spectralayers 9 Pros not showing up on e-licenser. So that's using the Steinberg licensing system. So from version 9, it migrated to the new system. So it's not going to work with the e-licenser. So. Michael Teams keeps calling me Yoda. I'll have to watch Star Wars again. All right. Wonderful that Patrick Emmanuel A was able to make it live today from India. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see John Mooney says, when I upgraded to Cubase 12 from 10, I had a problem setting up my Nektar LX61 plus 1 keyboard. I need some help. So if you just make sure that when you go to your studio setup, so I'm not sure if you come over, let's say you go to your studio setup, if you have in the controls here, see if you have your Nektar listed. So I'm not sure if you had it configured in Cubase 10, but look in Cubase 10 and you could see the different, see if you see the Nektar controller activated here. So, some people run it as, I think, a Mackie Huey control. You may see kind of a dedicated script for it right here. So if you do that, and also if you do see the script, make sure that you have the MIDI ports connected correctly for wherever your Nektar was set up as your control surface. All right, so we see, can we apply swing on metronome? So generally the metronome should be on the beat. But if you really need it to apply, I'll do a new project. If you really needed to, apply a metronome that had swing on it, generally you want to swing against the metronome as opposed to having your metronome actually swing. Let me just do new project here. So if you wanted to apply so let's say we have a MIDI track. So let's say I have between, let's say, measures 1 through 49 here. And I have my left and right locator set for where I want the metronome to end or start. But if you go to project and go to signature track, you'll see render MIDI click between locators. And now that will just render a click pattern, so that's going to be perfectly on the beat. So if you wanted to apply a swing, you could go into like the MIDI editor, go to quantize, and say, okay, I want to adjust my swing by let's say 50%, and now you could just simply as we quantize, or you could just come to the quantize panel. And, once we come over here, you could just say, okay, so we can see here that it's going to be quantized. So we could just continue to quantize to higher swing values. So you could, render the MIDI click and then be able to just come over and quantize that. But generally, you always want to swing against something, and the something that you're swinging against, for the reference of the time is going to be the click track. So I saw Patrick just ask, Greg, how's my mix? So I tried to listen to it. I think whenever you send me a file, I can't listen to it on my computer, but I can hear it on my phone. So I thought it sounded really good on my phone. But when you send it over like Facebook Messenger, then it just kind of spins over and over. So I didn't get a chance to listen to it on real speakers. But if you want to send me mixes, you could always just send me a quick link to it as well. And that way I could listen to it on something besides my phone. All right, so we see Sable is calling me a goat, and Michael Teams is calling me Yoda. So. All right. All right. So I just see Sam, Brashear, Greg. It's a straight audio to audio render. I really feel it's a technical issue. Any idea what tech issues it might be? Any suggestions from Cubase or hardware related? No info online on this. So let me see if I missed maybe the first question. But let's say if I so I'm not sure if I missed maybe the first part that was context to this. But let's say it just says it's a straight audio to audio render. So let's say if I render in place this function here, so I'll just turn this off. Let's get edit. Let's look at the straight audio to audio render. So it does look a little off. But let me just see if I maybe it made changes here. Yeah, I'll pass that along again. So, but let me know if I missed something in context from an earlier question from today. Okay. All right, just trying to find my spot. Okay, so we see from Harry Olive, good day, Greg. While playing totally exactly on the metronome, the MIDI recordings land previously 30-second minus, I guess, 30-second note on the MIDI track. My keyboard can't generate MIDI events before I press way to set up. So check to see if you get the same exact MIDI behavior. If you hit Alt or Option plus the letter K, if you're just trigger it with the mouse here. So obviously your keyboard can't play before it is played, but a MIDI driver could sometimes be trying to compensate for system timestamps, and it could be your MIDI driver. So if you have other MIDI controllers, or see if you get the actual if you click here directly on time, and if you see the MIDI timing is good. One other thing, if you're on the Windows platform, if you go to Studio Setup and go to, I think it's to the MIDI port setup, you may see activate system timestamp and ignore port filter. You could try toggling those settings if you're on Windows. All right. All right, so we see a question: how can I use my software and libraries on the new license system with Absolute Collection 5? So generally the licensing is upgraded as new versions are released. So Absolute Collection 5 will always be on the e-licenser. So if you want it to be on the new licensing system and all the libraries included with Absolute 5, you would need to upgrade to Absolute 6. So just upgrading to Absolute 6. All right, Steve Green asks, hi Greg, another query. Is there a similar live chat for Spectralayers, as I find it overwhelming to use things like stopping bleeding from other instruments when I extract vocals? Thanks. So generally, there's a guy named Mike Scheibinger, who's also an American. He's based out of, I think, like Madison, Wisconsin, or Milwaukee, or maybe between Madison and Milwaukee. But he does live streams on Spectralayers, so you could check with him, or you could check on it's probably just on the Steinberg Media YouTube channel, but there are live streams periodically for Spectralayers as well. They're just focused straight on that. All right, so we see from Kevin, are they going to have any sales on Dorico? I need to have some better chord tracks on my music. Could you some ways of product professional mastering to go back and have the right chords Dorico? So usually, I mean, I'm not aware of any chords that Dorico does. I mean, Dorico is obviously a wonderful program. I don't think it's currently on promotion. There are sales periodically throughout the year. But you should be able to get your chords done in Cubase as well as Dorico. So. Okay. All right, so Harry Olive asks a question. They're an undo per track and not. So we have two different undo histories. So one of the undo histories will be, for edits. So, and that will be like, it's not going to be like on a track by track basis. So if you move stuff around, swap it around, you can hit Control or Command Z and go right back to where you were. And then there's also, if you're in the mix console and you move stuff accidentally or just added plugins or changed plugin parameters, you can come over here and hit Alt or Option plus Z, and you can now just come over and see all of these. So if you hit Alt or Option plus Shift plus Z, or Alt or Option Z, you have unlimited undo, redo for editing with Control or Command plus Z, or for the mix console with Alt or Option Z, but it's going to be global and not limited to the track. All right, so we see a question from Kevin. Is there a way to get chord tracks in Wavelab? I never figured that out. So Wavelab's not going to do chord tracks. We can think of Wavelab as strictly an audio editor and mastering solution, but it's not necessarily going to be designed for chord tracks, which will be kind of more MIDI based and notation based. So Cubase and Dorico would be solutions for chord tracks. All right, wonderful to see David M. on from Liverpool. All right, so we see from Harry Olive, I think it's going back to the undo, says if you have been working on a song, creating various elements with beats and keyboards, and now you want to undo the previous bass recordings that were made some time ago. So a lot of times in situations like that, you could just, instead of going back, because there's a lot of things that could be, there's a lot of consequences with undo history. So if you wanted to go back, 6 steps, but let's say you did something else with the bass that's contingent upon it, that's why it's in a linear fashion for edits. But, if you just recorded a part and you're like, oh, I want to redo the bass, just, grab the eraser tool and erase and re-record. So I think it's pretty simple, but there isn't necessarily, I don't think having an undo per track would really, realize that there's lots of consequences. So it's going to be kind of global. If you just needed to redo the bass, just erase it and re-record. All right. So we see, please show how to make a guitar sample track of multiple wave samples. Can you make samples or multiple samples in arpeggio? So let's say if I want to take like a single bass note, I'll just kind of come over here. I think there's one I usually like to use in Soul Assembly. So let's say I just want to go to bass. All right, so let's say we have this bass note. All right, so I'm going to right click and we'll say create sampler track. And now so now we can just play it. So let's say I wanted to audio warp so that all of my samples are kind of the same, are just going to be playing back. So if I wanted to now take this sample track and let's go to my MIDI inserts, we could just say let's open up a quick arpeggiator and so any sample, whether it's guitar, bass, a drum, you could arpeggiate like that, Kevin. All right, so we see from Arnold, thank you, Greg, for the idea about how to split for arpeggio. Clarifying the question is separate email. Can you repeat your email address? So yeah, you can send it to Club Cubase, which is the name of the live stream, at steinberg.de. So Club Cubase at steinberg.de. All right, so John Mooney asks, is there a way for the score editor to import chord names from the chord track? So yes, we could do that. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to take the piano part in this performance here. All right, and I've added something goofy. All right. And I'm going to drag that to the chord track, and it's going to make chords for me. I want to go into my score editor for the piano part. And now if we go to scores, to advanced layout, we can say show chord track. And then the chord track will be laid out for us just like that. So again, just come over to scores once you have the chord track data, and then just click on show chord track. And then the chord track will be visible directly in your score. So I undid it. So give that a try. All right, we have a question from Paul Claridge, and he asked, hello, Greg, is there any way to stop any drum track from following the chord track? I've accidentally, not sure how, but changed my pattern to follow the chord. Any way of locking it? So if you have chord tracks and you don't want a track to follow the chord track, select like your drum track here, whether it's audio or MIDI, and go to chords, and you'll see follow chord track. Just choose off, and then that track won't follow the chord track. So again, just probably in the main part of the inspector. So if you come to the top here, you'll go to the chords tab. So if it's whether it's audio or MIDI, or if you go to audio, you'll see chords, and you'll see follow chord track. Just choose for the follow chord track, set it to off. All right, we see Pete Walker saying Belgium signed up. So thanks for joining us on the live stream. And Michael Teams wants everyone whack the like button. DJ FK just says AI art is boring, creepy already. All right. All right. So we just see, Greg, is there a way to make a ghost track? So I'm not sure if a ghost track there's different terminology that people use for ghost tracks, but if I wanted to look at, let's jump to So say I wanted to look at my violin and let's say my cello part. So I'm not sure if it's like an editing thing where you want to see both events here, and then you could choose to colorize by let's say by part. So now you could see so you could do editing on one part. So let me know if that's what you mean by ghost parts. I know different programs have different terminology for ghost parts. So, but you know, if you wanted to see that, let me know if that's what you mean. See, Michael Team is going to take my metric system comment into account. I think they'll be surprised at how much they actually get ice cream wise. So it's only going to be beneficial, Michael. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Can you create a template for a groove agent with different color for each pad and a different aux routing for each pad? All right, so let's say I just wanted to come here. Let's add an instrument track. I'll make this the active project. That will help. So you could definitely kind of start off, let's say with Groove Agent. I'll do Groove Agent SE since everyone has that particular version. So depending on your kit, so let's say if I go to let's say a beat agent kit when I'm kind of starting off. So now you could, you know, choose to it's just, I think we could set the colors. Let me just haven't set the colors. Okay, you can set the colors for different pads. Just right click. All right, so let's say we have these, and now I wanted this to be, so we could have, you know, this going out of out 1. We could send this out to out, let's say out 1, or master out. Let's send this to out 2, out 3, and out 4. And then you could save that as a preset. Now, if we're starting with so that's like a beat agent kit for the routing. So if we go to an acoustic agent kit, I will come over here. So it's just load a kit with patterns. So the coloring would be done the same way. And for each of the pads to set its output, we would go in, for an acoustic agent kit, we would select the mixer, and at the top of the channel, we could set the outputs there. So you could store that as a preset, or you could store it in a template without any sounds loaded in it. But you could, you know, once you have that kind of set up, just save the preset, and you should be all set to go. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer on. It just says another great Cubase feature is the Club Cubase live streams with Craig. So I think it's the Club Cubase live streams with everyone that's on it. So All right, so we see if I have multiple MIDI loops and I want to have them assigned to be triggered by different notes and different sounds simultaneously, is that possible? All right, so let's come over here and we'll experiment a little bit. Okay, so let's take a look at MIDI inserts. So, all right, so let's just take a look at something. I'll just take my playhead beyond the events here. All right, so let's just come over and say, okay, I want this to go to, like if you want to do monophonic stuff, you could go into Step Designer. And now kind of as you would play, and then you could trigger different patterns from just maybe put on cello here. So you could choose to do, different monophonic sequences and then trigger these different patterns. And be able to kind of, trigger different patterns from MIDI notes. If you wanted to. So there are some different provisions with that, and you could also, if you wanted to come into like Arpeggi SX, you could have more sequences that you could just trigger from MIDI notes as well. So if you say, okay, I want to take a particular sequence that I liked, so let's say I want to take part of this event, and I could just drag it directly to the MIDI sequence, and then we could just trigger the arpeggio for then you could have that automatically play or trigger different MIDI patterns with like Step Designer. And then you could also get into like where you get into like the chorder. So if you wanted to trigger different chords, there's wonderful presets for this as well. So you can say, okay, let's do some jazz chords. And you can combine the chorder with the arpeggiator with the Step Designer if you wanted to. So some different options in the MIDI plugins. Okay. So we see from Kevin just asking, what is the best in a keyboard multiple takes to get? The best of different recording tracks, the best mastering ways. So if you want to do like, the best takes, it's probably going to be using something like the, using the comping tool inside of Cubase. So let's see if I have this open. And you can do this for MIDI or audio really in the same way. So once you've done multiple passes, you could just click and show the lanes and grab the comping tool, and then you could just kind of comp away right there, Kevin. All right, so we have Cyberfly saying hi. Thanks for joining us. All right, so a question from Cyberfly asks, is it possible to connect a keyboard with no MIDI in and out, but with Bluetooth MIDI and receive wireless? So yeah, it's possible inside of Cubase. So it was added a few years ago. I think maybe Cubase 11 added that. So you just make sure that you have it connected and you see it available in the MIDI port system, but you could use Bluetooth MIDI. Realize that sometimes there is some latency issues that could come up with Bluetooth MIDI. So, but you could definitely run it with Cubase, so no problem. Okay, so we see which would be better for me, Dorico or Spectralayers 9. So Dorico, if you want to do like really high quality musical notation, and Spectralayers 9 will allow you to do kind of spectral editing, where you could do kind of frequency independent editing and being able to extract different parts. So they're really different tools, so it depends what you want to do. Okay, so we have a Rude Screen from Sunny Lows in South UK. Thanks for joining us. All right, and great to see Val Yu on. Glad you can make it today. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so you see, how do you spell Mike Scheibinger? So I think it's S-C-H-E-I-N, S-C-H-E-I-B, and then maybe I-N-G-E-R. But if you just look at some of the Spectralayers videos on the Steinberg YouTube channel, you can see his name there. So Mike Scheibinger. All right, so Beats Bastion 3, are you going to make some music or just answering technical questions? So the live streams, what we do is we answer user questions. So we don't really sit here and make music. It's really intended to help people get through technical questions or how to use the software better. That's the intention of the live stream. All right, so Kevin asks, is there a way to alter your chord track and make them professional music in Cubase, or do I have to buy Dorico? So, for your productions, all your chord track stuff can be done inside of Cubase. If you wanted to print it out for other musicians, like if you want to have a symphony orchestra perform your piece, Dorico is well suited for that. Okay, so John Movie says, Greg, thanks for all your help. Shout out from Southeast Florida. I used to go down there all the time, and I used to rep that area. So, All right, and wonderful to see Gerald Ely on from Martinez, California. And he's already gotten 1 gallon of cookies and creams ice cream. So, all right, so Jose Saliva asks, hi Greg, can you please show how to copy a channel strip, effects, compression, EQ, envelope, etc., one track to other multiple tracks? Is there a shortcut for this? Thanks in advance. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. I'll just create a new project here. Thank you for all the great questions so far. And if you've learned something, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, so I'm going to grab a number of audio tracks here. Okay, so let's say the first one. All right, so let's say I wanted to, we'll go to our channel strip. So let's say we have a compressor, a little bit of EQ, let's say de-esser, say magneto, and let's go to maximizer, and we'll throw a gate in. Just all right. So now let's say I want to. So I think if we just we could copy. All right. So I think we could just copy the tracks. Let's see. Now, if we have inserts on it, I'll just add an insert as well. Okay, so we can say copy first selected track settings. Then I'm going to come over here, then right click and paste settings to selected channel. And now when we come over here, we'll open up the other channels, we'll see that those will have their settings. So you could give that a try. You could also just come over here and save strip presets and be able to load up that as a preset into other tracks as well. So try, once you have it set, right click, and then you'll have copy first selected track settings, and then select your tracks and paste them. All right, we see Gerald Ely, who's been in since early, but hasn't been able to get his comment in. So sorry about that. I'm not sure why it happens sometimes to people on YouTube. All right. So you see, is it possible to pinch zoom? So I think it could kind of. I don't have a touchpad currently, so I have my Mac kind of put aside. But I think it'll kind of follow. So, I think it will follow conventions normally. So I think that you can, but I haven't tried it. All right. All right, so we see Kevin says, as long as they remind me, I will always spend 8 hours watching the Club Cubase. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, and you should get you should be able to get reminders automatically. All right. So we see from Kevin asks, forget if I already asked, how do you make heavy keyboards in arpeggio? So if you have, keyboard sounds, or like a MIDI track, all you have to do is really just add, as soon as we come over, and let's say I'll just take this off monophonic mode and just go to like the MIDI inserts, and then there's two different arpeggios. So I'm not sure what you mean make heavy keyboards in arpeggios, but you could do that with anything. Okay, so we see a clarification from Pete Walker. It says, actually, I meant a ghost track as a layer below a track I want to edit. So if you're doing it, so, we could see, I'll show you, maybe this is what you're meaning. So let's say with an audio event. So let's say I wanted to edit my sample, like I see my kick, and let's go to my snare here. So when I go to edit both of them, you could say, right, I'll just scroll over. All right, I'm just going to change the colors of this event so we can. Okay, so let's say we have our snare here, and let me go to, let's say, a kick. All right, so now we could see, I'll select a different event here. It might be easier. So here we could see when I go to, so I have two clips, suggested. So let's say now I'm editing the kick, but I could see the bass underneath, and when I go to the bass part, so let's say here we could see the two events kind of overlapping each other. So if you wanted to edit one against the other, you could do it like that. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking for, Pete. So it's not necessarily a layer below, but you could, so it is a layer kind of behind. All right, so we have a question, how to color track from Mix Console. So if we had the Mix Console open here, we could just click just to the right of the name, and whether it's in the full Mix Console, so you can say, okay, I want these tracks to be yellow, I want this one to be red, and then you could just change the color. So just click just to the right of the name, and then you can see the little color pop up, and that will allow you to color the tracks from within the Mix Console. All right, so we see how do I always snap my effects channel to the right edge of my Mix Console every time when I add an effects channel. All right, so let's just do a new project. Let's see if I can just go back to my. Okay, so the the effects channel will follow kind of the track order. So let me just remove these tracks here. Let me activate project. All right, so I'm going to add, let's say, 24 audio tracks. Okay, so we go to our mix console so we can see. All right, so now if I go to add an effects channel track, so let's add an effect, and then we see this little thing that says folder setup. So I'll say create inside folder. So now I do this, it's going to be added to the right. So that will go directly into the effects group. There's a folder for effects. So again, if I say, let's add an effect channel. So let's add a reverb. And then while this is folder setup, we say create inside folder. That will generally move it over to the right. If we add an effects channel and we say outside of folder, we can come over here and say, let's go to we'll add an effect channel. And if we say outside folder, it's going to go below the bottom selected track. So we'll come here, add that. So now it gets placed in the middle. But so if you choose inside the folder, it gets placed into an effects channel folder. And that by default will be below and over to the right. If you wanted to always anchor effects in a project, if you go to the visibility tab, then click on zones, you can then go to like your effects channels. And now as you move your effects channels, we could anchor these to the right so that as we move, these will always be fixed on the right-hand side of the mixer. So again, go to visibility tab, then click on zones, and then that you'll have kind of 3 dots that you could choose from. And you can say, okay, I want my stereo out and my effects and groups to always be anchored to the right. So as you navigate the mixer, those can always be fixed to the right. So 2 different ways of doing it. All right, so Kevin asks, all right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, so Kevin asked, Greg, I never asked you this. Can you set up a key in the work? 0-1, hit record, and automatically playback. What do you have said in your instrument? Guitar. So if you wanted to set set a key to record. So if it's like with the transport, really all you have to do is just, if you wanted to define the key for that, if it's a key command, Kevin, that you want, just come in and you could just type in like what do you want to do. So say record, search, and then you can say, okay, probably under transport, you could, not record enable, but we'll just say, record. It's probably going to be in transport. So if you come here, look under transport, and you'll see, scroll down to record. It'll be alphabetical. And at that point, you could just hit if you have a keyboard with a With a numeric keypad, you could just hit the asterisk key, and you could use that for recording, but you could change that key command just by selecting the key here and then typing in a new key command. Okay, so we see that the method for doing the copying modulation data. So there could be a lot of unintended consequences sometimes of having modulation data that's automatically applied to other parts as well. So where people could get results that are unintended. All right, let me just. All right, so we see clarification on the groove agent question. My question is how to save different color for each pad or aux when the pads are clean so that I could load samples from the library every time without rerouting. So there isn't like a template mode for Groove Agent like that. So you can modify the existing presets, but I'll pass it along as kind of a feature suggestion. All right, you see Gerald Ely has to step off. So thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see from John Barry, he just asks, whilst on the MIDI inserts, is there any reasoning behind the MIDI modifier in inserts and the MIDI modifier being slightly different? All right, so let's take a look at them. We'll come over here, just add an instrument track. Okay, so let's go to our MIDI inserts, and we'll get to the MIDI modifier. All right, and let's open up the MIDI modifiers here directly below, and let me just so I think that this is, looks like the insert may give you not as many random options. So, and I think also some of the design, like the intention of having this as a MIDI insert, or as a MIDI plugin, is that you could modify like another track based on it if you had like a MIDI send as well. But I think the intention is it could be applicable for not just the track. If you use it as a MIDI insert, it could be very similar. But you realize that if it's a MIDI send, you could send it to another MIDI track and have one part be randomized and another part that's very similar to it not be randomized. So I think that's why you see kind of it in both areas. All right, so Kevin asks, can you chat with me one day over the phone when I call you and I get out of here so we can talk about Helix Native? So I don't know too much about Helix Native. So I'm sure that my colleagues at line 6 would be able to help you out with that. Okay, so RCal773 says he can't pinch zoom, he uses his touch screen all the time. So thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so we see for Kevin, could you use a chord track when you want to play on a keyboard in a different note? Could you get that note to be in the key? Want it in the chord track? So you could always add chords, accidental notes into the chord. So tracks aren't necessarily restricted to only be on the chord track. All right, so Kevin also asks, Greg, can you give me the live stream if there's one for a live stream for Helix? So I don't know if there's a live stream for Helix, but you could probably check the Line 6 YouTube page. All right, when Chatfield just jumped. All right, so we see from John Barry, just says, hi, do you know a list of all the presets in Hallian or Sonic? There are some special ones like VX and Yamaha piano and Alan Morgan stuff, but never found any list anywhere. So it's always good to go through different presets. But one way of, if you're looking for particular presets, if you go to, let's say, your VST instruments, and let's say, okay, I'm going for Hallian Sonic, and then you could just say, okay, I'm searching for VX, and if you just type that in to the chat field, you'll see all of the ones that have different articulations. Or, okay, I'm looking for the Yamaha S90 ES, type in Yamaha, and you could see a lot of the Yamaha presets here from FM7, but you could just kind of search, and let's say, okay, Alan Morgan. So I'm not sure if he has synth presets or like other presets. So depending on the metadata, you could just search for it as well. All right, so we see question. This question may already have been answered previously, so apologies in advance. But are there ways of making future Cubase requests than during the live streams? So you could just simply, if you go to the Steinberg forums, there's like an official feature request area there. So you could always do it directly there. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. Glad he can make it today. Okay, so you see Kevin asking, will there ever be a club Cubase for Helix native? Will someone else do it? I asked you the question before, but I just want to make sure it wouldn't let me finish. So I don't think that there would be a club Cubase for the Line 6 plugin, but probably Line 6 probably wouldn't do a Cubase live stream as well, even though we're both owned by Yamaha. So it's probably best to, reach out to Line 6 if you have questions on that and see if they're doing live streams. All right, so we have a question from the Ninja Scared, or this Ninja Scared, sorry. I have some drum wave files Cubase is not reading in the Media Bay. Is there a reason why? So I don't know what would cause a a wave file not to be read. Make sure that one they are wave files and not like, that they're not like .m4a files. Like sometimes those would need to be converted, but if you have a particular file that you want to share with me, I'd be happy to see if it's being recognized. Also, one of the things is if you go to Media Bay, so say, you go to your Media Bay, wherever you have the particular files, make sure that, sometimes if you add files, it may not automatically go and look for every file. One of the things you can do in that particular folder, wherever you have, so just go into your file structure, try just right clicking and saying, rescan disk, and that will go through and rescan all of the files that are in that particular folder. So check there to see if it's visible in Media Bay. If you know where the file location is, make sure that it's a WAV file, that it's not like an 8-bit file or something odd like that. Check the resolution, but it should be able to be read. But whatever the folder is, try just to right click and rescan that folder in the disk, and you could look through anywhere on your file structure in Media Bay, and make sure that that folder is also checked to be included for Media Bay to search. Because let's say if you have pictures on your like family photos, you may not need Media Bay to search your family photos. So make sure that those are all active. Okay. All right, so Gareth wants me to give him a call so we can chat about the weather. So maybe I'll have some time over the weekend. So, but I hope the weather in Bilbao is good. Okay, I'm just reading through comments. Okay, so Gareth is like number 100. And he feels special. That's because Gareth is special. He always gets the award for wittiest comments in live streams. All right. So Kevin asks, is there any third-party plugins you could buy and are using in the Cubase plugin mixer? Do you know of any third-party plugins I don't know about, Greg? So any third-party plugin, as long as it's in VST format and 64-bit, will work. So unfortunately, I don't know what plugins you don't know about, Kevin. So sorry about that. All right, so Kevin asked another question. How come you can't put your own pictures in a Cubase WAV file? I just want to know why you can't do that. So generally, WAV files contain the audio You know, there might be some metadata for like album art, and you know, but generally you could do that like in Wavelab. But if you wanted to put if you meant pictures, when we go into like when we go into our mixer view, and we'll say let's go to, let's say, our pictures here. You know, so if you wanted to put your own user pictures, you could come over and put user pictures in directly here as well, so you could see it in the mixer. So if you wanted to just capture what your guitar amp looked like, stuff like that, you could do it. See Jazz Dude providing links for the Cubase Nation Discord. Thanks for doing that. See, Gareth says the weather is terrible in Bilbao. So. All right, so I think we're at the end of the chat questions. Let me go ahead, and we had a couple questions that were mailed in. So let me go to those really quickly. Gareth is trying to remember his pictures, or his questions rather. All right. All right, so we had a question on how to use Groove Agent to do variations on a drum loop. Okay, so I think I have I might have a project for this already. Okay, so sometimes when we have a drum loop and we want it to be maybe a little less recognizable, or we want it to be a little more creative with it, we could do some interesting things. So let's say we have our Groove Agent loop here. Okay, so now, so let's do the loop one more time. Get our bearings on it. So kind of a, you know, typical drum loop, nothing super creative about it, but let's come over here and I'm just going to drag it onto a pad and let's create slices. So now once we've done this, we could slice it based on the amplitude, and now basically each slice is going to be mapped out to its own pad. Now, if I wanted to take this pad, it's also created a pattern. So when we go to our pattern, we could drag this out into our project window. We'll copy it a couple times. And let's say this pattern, I want to do a quick variation on it. So I'm just going to use my arrow keys here. So what it's done is it's kind of, you know, created a MIDI file. So when you play this back, so we could get kind of natural musical variations just by kind of splitting up the slices. But now that we also want to be able to, let's say I want to take my snares and I'm going to select my 4 snare drums, and let's come over, and I wanted to change the pitch just on the snare drum as it plays. So I'll turn on a quick loop. So now that I have these 4 pads selected, I could go to like my pitch tab and I can say, okay, let's just come over and Or if I wanted to say this pitch, I want it to be really high, so it gets the next snare. And let's come over here and let's set up kind of maybe a random pitch for the third snare hit. So every time it comes here, it's just going to be a random pitch. And let's say the second snare, I want it to do maybe like a pitch envelope. So let's say I have, like, let's find the hi-hats here. So I'm just going to listen to. So we have this as a hi-hat pad. Okay, so I'm going to take my 3 hi-hat pads here, and then I'm going to go into my mixer, and let's come over to our aux sends, and let's just add a delay, or let's add a reverb here, and then aux send 2, I want to put a delay, so let's put a multi-delay, and we'll make it like 16th notes. Okay, so I want to take my hi-hats where they're isolated, and I have those 3 pads selected, here, here, and here. So I will come over and let's go to the amplifier section. I'm going to say aux send 2. So now we get that little shuffle feel. And let's take this last snare and let's run that snare through like a reverb. And let's take, let's find our kicks. Okay, so let's say we'll take these 4 kicks and I want to run these through maybe a filter. So let's say we'll open up a filter, turn on a filter for just the selected pads. So as we come over here, let's put on just and maybe we'll put just a little bit of an echo on the kicks, just a tiny bit. So you can see that just kind of playing around, just dragging a very kind of common drum loop in. So let's say we take just this particular drum loop and now turn it into so you can get all sorts of really creative results, just kind of slicing and dicing different drum loops together. All right, so we had a question. It says, thanks, Greg. Thanks for answering all our questions. When you do tempo detection, I've seen you going back to the beginning of the audio track, grab a pencil tool, and make a mark right at the first beat. Can you please explain what exactly you're doing and why? I do see other people doing tempo detection, but they do not do it the way you do. Thanks. It's from Lewis. All right. So let's say if we want to do tempo detection, I'll just revert to this. So as we do tempo detection, it actually kind of figures out what the beat is and what's going on with tempo. So I'll just import a new file here. All right, so we have our file. I'll make sure I'm not going to kill you volume-wise. So we turn on our metronome. All right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to do my tempo detection. So the tempo detection, again, basically just figures out what the beats are. So I'm going to do my tempo detection. So analyze. All right, so now it's figured out, again, kind of what... So we can see all of our tempo changes. And what I do is, since it does that, it changes the meter, since it's figuring out the beat, and it changes the meter to like a 1/4 time. So what I want to do now is often just come over here and just say, okay, let's put it into 4/4. Now sometimes you may have a pickup note as well. And if you have a pickup note, you may have like a da-da-da boom before the downbeat. And you want to make sure that you define the downbeat, because as you're doing other edits, everything is going to, be contingent on like the downbeat for different delays. So that's why I often go back and make sure I set the meter, because it could be, the song could be in 7/8, 3/4, 5/4, 4/4 is generally what most pop music, the most common meter is going to be 4/4, but it could be other meters. So that's why I go back to the beginning and actually set the particular meter in the signature track. So then we can just have everything line up perfectly with the track. All right, let me go back to live questions. All right, just find my place. All right, you see Michael Team's advice to Gareth is to write the questions down. All right, so we see from Gareth. So Gareth just says, it involves creating a part of a new audio channel and routing whatever you want into it. A brilliant solution. Let me see if I can... All right, so we just see we see from King Drew 562, duplicating to next track using the same instrument, please. So if you wanted to, just jump over here real quick. All right, so let's say I had like a, all right, let's say I have this MIDI pattern here. All right, so just playing a little Rhodes part. So if I wanted to duplicate that track, we could just duplicate track and we'll have the media automatically copied, but we could also, I think there's a macro that's built in, and my macro list is large from creating them. but I think you could duplicate selected tracks without data. So this is a standard macro. Then you could duplicate the track and not have any of the media on the track copied over. So let me know if that's what you want to do, King Drew 562. See, Drowsy Eternal just says pitch envelopes with 3 exclamation points. All right, so we have a question from Soren. Says, Greg, a friend of mine just got Cubase 12 Pro. He's taken a look at Spectralayers 1 and came to the conclusion that it's unbelievably strange and not useful. Let's see, continued. So we see part 2, it's not useful with Cubase 12 Pro license. We can open up Elements and see what's there. I would like to look at Spectralayers 1 and know what's in there. Can you tell me about the 1 version? So how the licensing works is, I would have to deactivate my Spectralayers Pro license. But, Spectralayers 1, so maybe, I'm not sure if your friend maybe doesn't understand kind of concept of spectral editing. It's a different concept from, because most of the time when we do audio editing, if we cut a part of the file, we actually come over here and we cut all of the frequencies out of that file. So the lows, the mids, and the highs. But what we could do, with spectral editing, let's see if my computer's going, is to choose to edit, particular frequencies. So what you could do with Spectralayers is, I'll just enable it here real quick. So now as we double click, we can go into and see our different frequency ranges. So when we look at this, we can see this is almost like taking the waveform on its side. We have our low frequencies, our mids, our highs. And let's say if you had, like a sound of like, me hitting the microphone, or I just like did a, like, had a low breath or hit my desk. What you could do is just come over here and you could have different selection tools. So you can say, okay, this is where I see the particular, type, I could kind of lasso the selection here and say, this is, where I hit my desk. So we can say, okay, let's make it like an elliptical shape. And I want it to reduce those particular frequencies. So I could do edits on individual frequency ranges. So you say, okay, I just want to take out those frequencies so I could remove the harmonic overtones from particular audio sources. Also, when we go to Spectralayers 1, we could just come over here and say unmix stems, and you could unmix the vocals. Other, Spectralayers Elements or Pro will have kind of the full version where you could remove not only vocals but piano, drums, and bass. So you have the capability of doing kind of, more surgical editing for taking out squeaks of an acoustic guitar recording, lip smacks, that type of, if you have a vocalist that does that all the time, you could get rid of those types of things, really high quality sibilants. So there's a lot of great functionality that you could do using kind of the current, Spectralayers 1. So, all right. And Gareth just says, did a brilliant job of removing various background noise and frequency hums in the track he had recently. So usually when you're kind of in trouble is when Spectralayers will come and save the day, kind of galloping in on a beautiful white horse with a cape. Okay, so you see a question regarding one question about the human feel piano. Tried the MIDI modifiers, it works, but when I select freeze MIDI modifiers, Cubase doubles the notes. But in Logical Editor, it all works well. So let's take a look at it and just see. Okay, so we're doing it on this project here. Okay. So I'll take a look in, we'll open it in the list editor. All right, and so it didn't seem to double the MIDI notes here. Let's look at it in the list editor because that will be pretty apparent. So it doesn't seem like the notes are doubled here. So we would see it pretty clearly in the list editor. So let me listen to it. So it didn't seem to create doubles for me, but let me know if I did it differently than you did. Okay, just reading through comments. See, Michael Pierce just says he uses a combination of RX and Spectralayers, but RX's integration with Cubase is utter garbage, according to him. And Gareth says the background noise detection is excellent, and also great for repeated noise detection and reducing unpleasant transients. Sable asks, Greg, when will the index for today's stream be available? So it should be, I'll probably take a dinner break. So maybe like 9 o'clock U.S. Eastern time. So maybe in about 4.5 hours from now, I think we should have the index done. Gareth wants people to DS to like. Okay. Okay, so we see from John Barry, just says, "Hi Greg, are chord tracks in operation MIDI modifiers as well? Cheers." All right, so let me just jump over to, we'll create a chord track here. So there's no MIDI modifiers on the chord tracks in operation MIDI modifiers as well. Cheers. Okay, so maybe if we had this set to set this to monitor, so let's say we have this set to go out to the grand, and we have this. Let's see if that doubles it. Maybe this is what John is getting at. Okay, so yeah, if you're doing that, it looks like it will just, so if you have the chord track, just, maybe before doing that, just mute the chord track or take this off of record. So that will kind of put both of them on. So maybe that's what's causing the problem. All right, so we see question from Gareth. Can a chord track be exported as an XML? So I think it could be exported as a music XML, but what you would need to do is, let's go ahead and let me just grab that macro. So I'll just add MIDI track here. All right, so if I go into the score editor, let's go to page mode. So we'll just come here, page mode, and now we will again go to scores, to advanced layout, and we'll show chord track. So now at this point we could export it as a music XML file, so you could import it into notation program, but not as a kind of a generic like XML file to be imported into other programs, but you could do it into like notation programs through music XML. So let me know if that will work for you. And let's see if, and also if you come over to import tracks from project, I think that you could import the chord track from another project directly in as well. So you can see from the Bach piece just now, import it. All right. Just reading through. All right, so we have a question from Lawrence Koch. What's the best way to print a fax for archiving purposes or to send off to a mixer. Not sure if it's like sending a fax from a fax machine. But one of the things that I often do, let me just find the project here quickly. So I'm not sure if it's like notes that you want to share with a mixer. But one of the things that I often do, if you come over here to, let's say, the notepad, let's say we have like little notes on each of the tracks in the notepad here. So you can say like, okay, we used this microphone, U87 no pop filters. So you can make different notes there. And let's say also if you go to the project notepad, we could have stuff like copyright information, the lyrics. You could have the chords kind of transcribed here if you needed to. And then to get this, I'm not sure if this is what you want to fax, but if we just export, so we get a file to export and we say notepad data, that at that point we could just come over here, open it up, and it will create a text file with all of the global, kind of the project text, and each of the tracks text. So let me know if that's kind of what you were thinking of, Lawrence. Okay, I just see, maybe I see it's a typo, maybe. Hey, Greg, what's the best way to print? Maybe it's best way to print effects for archiving purposes or to send off to the mixer. So if you wanted to, embed all of your effects, we could just go to export audio mixdown. And then when we do multiple, we can say, okay, I wanted to select all my group channels, all my effects channels, all the instrument tracks, all of my VST instrument channels, my audio channels. So I could, have everything selected here. And then on effects, we could say, let's include groups and sends, or if you wanted to include the master effects. Now we could make individual stems with all of the effects and EQs kind of burned into the files, so that the mixer could, have a reference of all of, what you were hearing in your particular setup, and they could balance the levels. So sorry for misunderstanding. Maybe one of those is right. All right, so Spencer B asks, when recording MIDI in cycle mode, I end up with 2 takes. How do I merge them or pick one over the other? Okay, so let's say I'll just come here. All right, so I'll set up a quick merge here. So let's. Okay, so now let me just make this a little louder. Okay, so there are different MIDI recording modes, and you can set this up for MIDI. So if you're cycling, you could mix, you could overwrite, keep to last, or stacked. So let's say I will choose to keep last. All right, so now often, depending on your record mode, you may see that, we come over here. So now we chose to merge those two events, but let's say if we choose to do stacked instead, so we'll come here. All right, so now we have kind of two different events. And if we, wanted to unmute, so once we have, let's say, so right now, since we put those into, in cycled recording, we put it into stacked. I could now just go to the bottom center, and we'll see a little drop-down menu. So you could take recording 2 or recording 1. And if you wanted to merge them, grab the glue tool. So let's just see the little glue tool here, and I think it's Alt or Option. And now you could just click on the glue tool with Alt or Option and merge them into one single event. Okay. Okay, my chat field just jumped. All right. All right, so we see Gareth about the chord track, and he's just wondering about export selected tracks. So let's take a look and see if that is carried over. We'll copy the media file, so I'm not sure if this is... So we'll see if this will work with the track archives. Yep, so it looks like it works as a track archive as well, Gareth. Okay. You see Lawrence Koch had a text-to-speech thing about facts. So, and he's driving. So thanks for being on the live stream while you're driving. All right. Hi, Greg. I'm wondering if it's possible to select different audio devices for in and out. I'm trying to record audio from YouTube directly into Cubase and hear what is being recorded. Thanks. So usually, you can probably set it up as a loopback device depending on your hardware, but generally, when you run two different audio interfaces, they're not going to be properly synchronized. So that's why it's kind of avoided, because the two sources can't really synchronize. There are a number of solutions like where you could go to YouTube and You know, like one thing I do a lot of times is just YouTube to MP3, and it's a little utility, and you could just type in copy the YouTube video address and type it into utilities, and at that point, just it'll go to the site and download an MP3 of the audio. If you have something like the audio mixer I'm using currently is a Yamaha AG08, and that would allow you to do it as well. So it really depends on your audio interface. But like the AG08 and the AG series from Yamaha will allow you to do that. Sable Winters just says, thanks for the project notes tip. So it's always good to work with. You can see Gareth misses his old U87s. Boohoo. Man. So he had a pair of 1981 U87s. Wonderful. So I have a pair of 1968 U87s. So my son doesn't get to play with those. Okay, just reading through comments. See Spike Williams just thanking everyone for a great session. He has to dash, so thanks for joining us. So Gareth, now is 1968, and they're probably I bought them from the original owner as well, just maybe about 5 years ago. Who finally retired. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. Sable Winters asks, Greg, will we have a special guest on the next Zoom? So I have a call into someone. I just called them this morning. So we'll see if we have a special guest, but I'm trying to get someone who's kind of worked with lots of different people, can share all sorts of great production insight. So I will try to have someone for, I think it's going to be in the United States, Memorial Day, so I think it's maybe May 30th. Should be 2 weeks from today, May 30th. And Gareth wants the special guest to be Sable Winters. That'd be good. And we look forward to seeing Sable's new gadget that she usually shares with us that she's just gotten. All right, we'll give it another minute or so, see if there's more questions. Thank you, everyone, for such great questions. Hope that everyone has learned some new tips and tricks. And if you have, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Michael Pierce will be in Scotland when our next Zoom meetup. Okay, so with that, I guess we are out of questions. So I want to thank everyone for wonderful questions. Thank you for spending part of your evening, afternoon, morning watching the live stream. And if you have questions that you want to send in advance, you can send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and we'll see everyone back on Friday. So everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you Friday for the next live stream. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. So I want to thank everyone for wonderful questions. Thank you for spending part of your evening.